Greetings, Waze community members from all around the world. Welcome to Waze Community's office hours right here in YouTube land. I'm your host with the most, Brett, and today I have a very special episode that's very dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about Waze joining the EV revolution, and I have with me Arie, our PM for the EV Taskforce. As many of you know, EV has been my personal squad project for the last 6 months almost already, and we are now about to launch. But before we get to any of that, I've got a couple of announcements for you. First and foremost, our next episode of Office Hours is going to be a huge double spectacular that my amazing team member Anat is hosting with Waze's new CPO, Tina Wayand. So we're going to do 2 sessions, one in an earlier time and one in a later time, so that we can cover everyone on Earth and be able to ask your questions to our new CPO, Chief Product Officer, Tina. And we're really looking forward, so check it out on the forum to register for that event. So without further ado, how about we get started, Arie?
Sure,
Sound good?
Sure.
All right, let me throw up our deck and you can take it away.
Thank you. And that was an amazing intro. So we are all here excited to talk about the EVs. And let me introduce myself first. I'm Arie. I'm a product manager for EVs and performance. But today I'm only putting my EV hat. And I also want to actually apologize for the people from North America who visited the latest meetup and saw part of those slides. We will be reusing some of those slides, but again, we'll try to...
You're not supposed to spoil it. No one at home knows this. It's okay.
All right. And after those disclaimers, let's jump into the presentation.
Awesome.
Right. So I think all of us know that EVs is emerging and is growing exponentially. And, even today, we already have about 30 million EVs on the roads. And the growth, as I said, exponential. Next year, we're going to have more than 40 million EVs on the roads. And the growth will accelerate as we go forward. Also because EV just provides a superior value for the drivers, but also because there is a legislation around the world that supports that. So a couple of days ago, EU verified the law that will ban the sales of non-EV cars from 2035 and going forward. And in order to support that, the OEMs are starting even today to focus more and more on the EV production and stop producing the ICE cars. And this will accelerate the growth going forward. And we will see more and more cars, EVs on the road. So we as Waze, we believe that now is the right time to start supporting EVs because there is sufficient number of them on the road today, and this number will only grow in the future. So this is what we were trying to do. Next slide, please. And since October, we were working really, really hard on actually building a first step in our EV support. Next slide. And here we can show you basically the roadmap of what we have done since then. So as I mentioned before, in the middle of October, we started the development, worked for 2.5 months, and starting releasing our what we call V1 version of EV. Some of you participated in our alpha testing and contributed significantly to making sure that we have a great product. Later on, we started mapping efforts in some test countries. Again, thank you very much for those who did that and help us making sure that we have the WME part mature, and also doing the mapping as an early adopters, developing some standards that now we can reuse across the countries. And we started doing that from more or less second week of January. In parallel, we obviously planning and starting executing on our goals towards and plans towards the next half, bringing you more exciting features. We're going to speak about them a little bit later. And once we progress with the mapping, we start in rolling out the EV features in those countries where the mapping progressed. And now we are in the middle of the experiment where some of those countries are exposed to 50%. So it means that half of the users there can get, an EV features in their app. And today, we are in the phase where we would like to expand our mapping geography, add additional countries, and we're going to speak about that a little bit later as well. Next slide, please. Right. So let's talk a little bit about what was done on the mobile side. So basically, we implemented an ability for the user to configure themselves as an EV driver, select their preferred plugs, and it's important asset then, because basically we want to make sure that you can provide more than one plug type. You can have an adapter, etc., etc. So we developed that capability, and then search is basically what ties everything up. So there is a backend side that we're going to spend a lot of time on that, and there is a front end side. And once you have basically configured your plug types, you can get the search results that fits this information. And the search results, you can get them in the pre-drive from the category search. And if you can see an icon of EV charging station replacing the gas station. Again, if you configure yourself as an EV driver, the gas icon will be replaced with a charging icon. And you can also get it in the mid-drive, and then you will get the charging station along your route, giving you an ability to charge when you need that. So if you can see within the search results, you get an information such as the number of plugs, their types, whether they're fast or slow, and the detailed information actually appears in the what we call location preview page on the right-hand side, and there you will have more information, such as a detailed information on each plug type, payment methods, etc., etc. Now, this is the front end. Again, this is the V1. We're going to have significantly more scope going forward. We're going to talk about that later. But everything that was developed and is being shown today basically was enabled by the WME, by the data which is being put into our systems, and basically by your contribution, because you play a central role within this process. And we're going to talk about that now.
Let's stop for a moment. I want to take this
Sure.
question from Bobby about what about hybrid users? Are they able to use the feature as well, or is this only for pure EV vehicles?
So hybrid, we basically differentiate between several types of hybrids. As long as they have a plug, they're considered an EV, also within the general classification. And basically, they can use the plug type. If the question is related to actually to have an ability to look for the gas station and the charging station, yeah, we give the preference. If you define yourself as an EV driver, we give a preference for the charging station. But gas station is still there. You need to search for that, but it's still there. And the gas station will be available on the map if you search for it.
Excellent.
Right. Now let's talk about, and basically our goal eventually to build best-in-class EV charging station product. And in order to do so, we believe that we need the best-in-class charging station data. So let's talk about how we are planning to do that. Next slide, please. And data is critical for the success of the product, right? And with regards to the data, we need the following attributes. We need to have plug type information. We need to have their number. Essential information is to have real-time availability, not only what types of plugs are available, but how many of those are available right now. And this is something that we're going to speak about, how we're going to bring this information, charging speed, charging cost, charging networks, how to find a difficult to find charging station. Again, hyper local information that we are uniquely positioned to capture and nobody else can. So those are the types of the parameters that we want to have. And now let's talk about the process on how we're going to get that. So our current strategy towards obtaining this data is working with data feed providers. We will need more than one. We will need several one to get a good coverage in all the regions where it's important. We are starting with one, and we're going to add more over time. The data feed providers give us geographic scale and scope in multiple countries. This is one very important advantage of working with feed providers, and they will also give us a real-time availability that I mentioned before. So basically, it will be able to get a dynamic availability information with a granularity of a couple of minutes for many of the charging stations that we're going to have. Again, this is something which is a critical component of a best-in-class EV solution. And this is why we are basically working with several feed providers. Those are the ones that also work with Google, so they have the scale, and they work with the network operators, aggregate their data, and give us the access to that. So the way we work with that is that we take this data, and then we surface that for the community to validate, enrich, and cleanse, because basically sometimes the information is wrong, as probably some of you who did the mapping saw. So we want to make sure that it's not only that we're working with those feed providers, but we also make sure that we have the unique data set because of that. Because again, this combination gives us the uniqueness that others do not have. Next slide. So in order to support that, we implemented WME features that hopefully make this process easy and scalable for the community. So here you have a QR code that can take you to the wiki guide where you can read more about those features. I'm going to stop for a second. By the way, maybe let's use this point to actually answer some question and give people some time to actually access the QR code, if there is some question.
Sure. So let's, I just go from the bottom up. So the first one here is is there something that we can share about the sources for our feeds?
So as I mentioned, we are leveraging the existing partnership that Google has with data feed providers. And among those, we are picking the ones who are basically should be the best one and have the best coverage, and most importantly, provide us with the real-time information that is needed. So this is kind of the criteria for the selection. We start again with the one who has the biggest coverage and satisfies the other criteria that I mentioned, and we're going to add an additional ones to improve the coverage in the various regions where we don't have a good coverage today, or we will feel that in a specific country we need more coverage relative to the overall number of charging stations existing in that country.
And then following up with Roy's question here, given Koi Fish and a lot of the other data sharing we're doing now with Geo, how much of the data that we are going to generate as a community is going to be shared back with Geo for their EV charging?
Right. So basically, they find this information, I'm talking about Geo, super valuable to them. And we are already seeing that after the community review, our data becomes significantly better than the data that was originally imported by them and what they have in their database. So they're very much willing to get those information for us. We are in the discussion on how and when it should be implemented, and eventually we're going to reach some kind of an agreement on that. For now, this data is not being shared. And actually, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but we do want to share part of the data with the feed provider. So we will get the charging information in the next iteration, which is more precise. Now, when we do that, Geo will benefit from this data as well, because they will get the data from the feed provider. So in some sense, we will be helping them. But to the original question, we are now defining the right way of sharing the data with Geo. For now, it's not being shared, at least not directly.
Great. So I also want to just surface Nick's comment here. An important note on the guide that yes, so this is a guide that I prepared several weeks ago when we introduced the WME feature to the whole community. You'll find there a deck that goes through step-by-step instructions for how to use the basic parts of the feature. But for anything more complicated, like naming conventions or the public versus restricted venues debate, which we're going to get into tonight. That is all on a country by country basis, like everything else mapping regulated in Waze. So make sure that you check in with your country's champs and coordinators to know exactly how your country's regulations are set up for how to map these. So let's move on to talk about WME.
Right. So I think we put a lot of emphasis on WME, knowing that data is super important. And at least initially, for us, it was not, we can say it was more important than the mobile side. And basically, what we implemented is the ability to generate PURs based on those data feeds that we are getting. So each and every charging station will be surfaced to the community as a PUR for you to accept or to reject. Basically, we encourage you to accept the charging station, to improve the charging station if it's there. And if some of the information might be wrong, let's fix it later, but let's approve that. And again, we're going to talk about that in more details in the second part.
This is something that's super important, though, so I want to stop on it for a moment because I put this in like all bold, large size font in every post that I made to the community so far. That we much prefer, if there's a data issue with the charging station, please accept the PUR and then tell us through the spreadsheet that we'll give you for your country that there's an issue, so that then we can go back to the feed provider and have them fix the data. Because when you reject a PUR, it severs the link to the feed. So that means that we can never fix it. We won't be able to make it right. The only reason to reject a PUR is if the station physically is not there in reality. But if it's wrong, if it's in the wrong location, if the plugs are wrong, that's all data that we can fix with the feed provider. So we still want you to accept it and then let us know and we'll fix it. Great. Moving right along.
Right. So those were the PURs that we implemented to support into the feeds. Now, once the PUR is accepted, or you actually doing a new charging station mapping, we'll also introduce those capabilities within the WME, which are specific for EVs, right? So basically, if you're adding a new charging station, if you select a venue type charging station, then your display changes. So you get some unique fields for EVs, such as network, payment methods, location, and venue. Again, a critical field that we're going to talk about that basically gives you the information where exactly in the venue the charger is located. This is one thing that was changed. On the other hand, we added the entire new tab, which have charging information, where you can select one or more plug types of a certain type and add them if you are adding a new charging station.
I just want to stop because we have a really important conversation that's coming up in the comments right now on what's the difference between the public, the restricted, and the private charging stations. So I did include this in the post, but just to make this very clear, a public station is one that anyone can use. A restricted station is a station that's typically at a public venue, but there's restrictions on who can use it. A great example of this is like a hotel where you have to be a guest at the hotel in order to use the charger in their parking lot. And then a private station is a station that's completely private, like if it's at a office complex where only workers can use it, or if it's at a private venue, like a club or something like that, where it doesn't allow the general public to use it. Now, for the WME, we were only sending you in first public stations. In the sheet that you'll see all the public and restricted ones, but for the PURs, we're sending public or public and restricted?
Public and restricted.
Okay, so those are the public venues. And to make this even more complicated, it's really country by country how your communities are deciding to treat them. Now, from the Waze perspective, we consider that if a restricted station is still accessible to the public, like that hotel parking lot example, it should be surfaced, but then in the description, you should write, that only for use by hotel guests or something, so that the users then know that there's some sort of restriction on that station. If it is at a private residence or if it's a completely private location, we won't be showing those.
Just to reemphasize that point, so based on the feedback from the community that we got, we actually implemented can call it a feature, in which we only surfacing the public charging station in our search results, right? Again, we didn't have that, and we got some feedback from the community, and we implemented that. But when you are marking a charging station as a not public charging station, for now, it will not be surfaced to the users. We need to understand what does it mean, right? I mean, and we're going to talk about that. In the next phases, we're going to release what we call filters, and there the user will have the ability to actually specify which type of the venues they want to see. They will have a public and restricted, but for now, we're just excluding the non-public charging stations. So it's critical and important to make sure that all the charging stations that basically we should surface will be for now set as a public ones. And as Brett mentioned, we have some misalignment in our definition of the public with how it is defined in the feed provider data. They consider some of what we consider public charging station as restricted public station. So please, think about the best way to treat that and apply that. This is super, super, super important. And I think there was also some agreement and standard within the international community on how to treat that. But again, it's up to each country to decide.
Exactly. And I will also, before we move on, I just want to take this other question from Narconet, that if they accidentally reject a PUR, can we resend it to them at a later time?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if that's the case and you accidentally rejected a PUR, make sure that you mark it on the sheet, and then we will refeed that later. So shall we move on?
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. So I think there will be at least another occasion. There was a lot of questions with regards to what happens with the already mapped charging station. And so we implemented a capability that basically allows us to take the old charging station that was mapped previously and merge it with a new charging station that we are receiving now from the feed. It's a critical functionality. What's important to understand that during this merge, the charging information will always be taken from the feed sourced charging station to maintain this backward connection. So will enable us to get the real-time availability in the future. Everything else you can decide from where to take it, right? So again, this to reuse already previous mapping efforts, and also will allow us to continue our mapping efforts that could be reused in the future when we're going to have some additional feeds for the countries where we don't have them right now.
So speaking of, our big announcement is that starting tomorrow on Monday, we are going to start pushing the PURs live in the 48 countries left in the feed that we haven't started piloting yet. I've already earlier today sent a list to all of your coordinators that have direct links to the spreadsheets, and they can share them directly with all of you. It's very important, we didn't mention before, the PURs incoming are going to be locked to level 4+, and that's hard-coded. We decided this, actually, the community decided this through the feature discovery group that we ran earlier last year in the fall, because it's so sensitive that they didn't want to leave this open for lower-ranked editors. However, in the future, we will be adjusting that on a country basis. But for right now, for initial launch, everything is locked to level 4+. But tomorrow, the PURs will arrive, and it's going to be very exciting. We can't wait for you all to start going through it.
Right. So should we take some question, or because there was some question with regards to I think it's continuation of the question private versus public. For example, this one from Macron.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So when he was in San Francisco, Tesla had 2 superchargers.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
So basically, and again, it comes back to private versus restricted versus public. Even if the charging station is located at the paid garage or something that requires payment but is accessible for everyone, the discussion that we had with the community up until now was that it should be mapped as public one, and then there will be some information with regards to the payment, that it's actually located at the payment parking. But still, the logic is if everybody can access the place, even if they need to pay for that, this is public. If it's restricted to some sub-segment, basically the customers of certain place, probably it's more of a restricted. And if it's a private, located in the private place, then it's private, right? So,
absolutely. I'm seeing a couple of here on specific countries. So Italy was requested by the community leadership for us to hold off because they still have to do some more internal conversations on how they best want to map this. And for our Estonian coordinator, make sure you check the forum post on EVs in the coordinator forum, because that's where I posted it earlier today. And yes, also there are several territories that were listed. So for example, for the UK, there's Jersey and Isle of Man and another one. Those are all found in the UK spreadsheet so that we combine them all in there. Cool. So
no. Let's talk about.
You want to talk about this?
Yeah. I think it's important to talk
Absolutely.
about that. So, at the first slides, we showed you what we have today, but we are continuing to work on the new features and now putting a lot of emphasis both on the mobile side but also on the backend side. And those are the ones that we're going to work on during this half, basically until the next July.
There's one more here. Right, I just want to know the PURs. So if you're already seeing the EV PURs starting for your country, that means that they were part of our test pilot, so you can continue to process them. We've been sending, I think for that, we were up to 10 countries now that we started piloting with. So those for the last month have all been open, receiving PURs in different batches. So if your country, like the United States or Canada or the UK or several of the European countries we're working with, have already started receiving, you're good to go, and we're just going to start sending you more.
Amazing. Cool. So let's talk about some new features that we are working on. So basically, I mentioned that before, we want to have in category search to add some search filters that will allow the users to select, all the plug types, only the plug type that are relevant to them. Select only the fast or super fast chargers or all the chargers. Select what were the discussion that we had before, the public charging station or also the restricted charging station, etc., etc. So we're going to have a set of the filters that will allow the users to get the charging station, which is right to them now in this point of time at the place where they are. So this is the first thing that we are working on. Another thing is real-time availability. So we build an infrastructure for that. We established the partnership to support that. Now will be the time to support that. So basically, for most of our charging station, we will be able to provide the real-time availability, saying in each and every minute how many plugs are available at the charging station now, how many are taken, how many are broken, etc., etc. So this is the information that we're gonna implement and surface to our users. I think critical capability. Then EV user-generated content. I saw a couple of questions around that. Some of them related to gas reporting, etc., etc. So we are currently working on that. We are trying to understand what would be the best way to handle that. So part of that is probably will also influence our offering with regards to the gas pricing, because there can be some improvements that we can do there. And also there is a lot of commonality between the EV and the gas pricing, UGC reporting. In any case, for now, we are seeing potentially two paths. One is the enhanced ability to do the venue modification, basically an ability to surface PURs by the drivers to update the information of the venue. This is one. And two should be something more of a lightweight, basically asking the question whether the charging station is there, for example. So, for example, we map that. We want to make sure that it's actually there. We want to ask them whether it's really have 6 CHAdeMO plugs or not. So yes, no questions. That we'll probably start with those. It's especially important in the early stages of the mapping to make sure that what we map is correct, and then add into more detailed flows that enable the users to actually to edit almost all of the venue fields.
So I'm seeing a few questions in here about countries that aren't included in the feed. I want to encourage you all that you can start mapping these now. If you'd like, you can just request from your staff community manager a list of all of the EV charging stations that you already have mapped in the country. we'll send you a spreadsheet with all of them that you already have in the WME so that you can manually upgrade them. Unfortunately, this is, by the way, only the first feed that we're working with, and it's a static data set because we want to get this right before turning it on live. So basically, if your country isn't included in this data set, that's okay. Most likely it will be included in the future data sets that we're going to import. And for now, you can go ahead and start upgrading the existing stations and creating new ones where you know where they are. And then, which I'll show you in the live demo we'll get to in a couple of minutes, you'll be able to merge them with a feed supported station so that they'll be connected to the feed and then get real-time updates.
Exactly. So just to finish that slide, and then we really need to move into the path of the WME simulation. But basically, in-cart support, again, now it's only partially supported. So, but basically, we want to have the entire capabilities that we today have on mobile be supported, at least in the projected in-car. Again, we are working on that, and we are hoping to have it sometimes between late Q1 and early Q2. And on top of that, we are also working, as Brett just mentioned, on improving the VCS coverage, making sure that in the countries where we don't have the feed support today, we will have it in the future. Bringing multiple feed providers for a certain country where we didn't achieve the significant coverage with one feed, and etc. So this is an additional stream of work we are working on as we speak.
So just to cover this again, like what should they do if the plug-in charger info is wrong? Still accept the PUR, and then in the spreadsheet, let us know exactly what is wrong. We'll communicate that back to the feed provider. And then once the feed is turned on to live, that should automatically update to then fix it to have the right types of plugs at that station. Great. So anything else on this, or can we move on?
Yeah, let's move on now. Yeah.
So just to show you all how nice and easy this is, I, the Luddite that I am, even though I'm a level 7 god in the WME, I'm going to show you how the flow works for accepting a PUR and adjusting it. So I actually found one that I really liked. It's the second one here from Alabama. This is the sheet that every country has for the feed now, by the way. So it starts off here with a permalink, gives you more information about the feed. You can actually see the list of all the chargers that are there. And then these are mostly locked for you all, but then where you can comment is back here. So just to go through the status, there's each country has this a little bit differently because your coordinators are helping to customize this for your needs. But the ones that I really care about are only duplicate in the feed and problem. So a duplicate in the feed is when two of these rows are exactly the same and they mistakenly put it on twice. And then a problem is where you would highlight like, hey, the plugs are wrong. Hey, the information on this is wrong in some way. So that way we can then communicate it back to the feed provider and have it fixed for you in the back-end data. So moving right along, I want to launch this one in Athens, Georgia, which is an Electrify America public station. So let's open that up in the WME. And what is so cool and why I liked this one is because there is an old style EV charging station venue here. And in this one, our amazing community even listed the types of chargers plugs that it has at the description. So first, let's take a look at our PUR. So here we can see already from this list, there's 3 CCS and then 1 CHAdeMO. That's exactly what we see here from the feed. I'm going to go ahead and approve it and then make sure we save. Yes, save successfully. We don't have to torture any engineers later. Very nice.
We did it just before the...
Exactly. So now that we have these two and they're exactly the same, let's go ahead and merge. So we're going to take these two stations. Uh-oh, control. Is it not going to let me do this? Okay, let's try this way.
That everything will work in the life day.
I know. It's not letting me select. Okay, let's try this again. I'll take this one. Ah, yeah. There we go. Okay, so we're going to merge these two. So I want my description, my address.
Let's take the name from the, yeah.
We want to take the name.
Yeah, it looks more detailed.
Sure. So we'll take the name that was from the old PUR, the addresses. We'll take the one with the east since that's a little more accurate. And then we have our external provider. We have our open hours. It's the same URL there, so we can leave it, and we'll leave it with the US formatting. And then let's merge them.
Let's pray.
And beautiful.
Ta-da!
Now we're going to move the pin because, and this is really ideal. Now I will admit, most of our stations are not this clear because like if it's in a covered parking garage, you wouldn't see something like this. But because we're here in a big open parking lot, we can physically see these 4 charging stations that are right here, the pillars. So we know we can drop our pin right there and we'll save, and voila. That is our basic flow. Now, each country is going to have different naming conventions. You're going to have other restrictions that you might want to do that are local to your country. That's totally fine. My purpose today was just to demonstrate for you the very basic flow and to show that I really, Arie can attest, I've been harassing him, fought so hard to make sure that this was fully baked for you all, and I really hope that you appreciate it. So now exactly, Tom, thank you for reminding me. We can go back to our sheet. So I'm going to share the tab here. And I'm going to code this. Let's see from the US, how did we do these? So Arie and Waze and merged. And username, I don't know why this is a dropdown, it shouldn't be, but we'll just put my username so that they know it was me. So there we go. And that's our entire flow. So now I think, and yeah, exactly. So, and then Abigail, thank you. I know you're going to go fix this one later. And I knew I could take this from the SCR region because you wouldn't be too mad at me. So I really appreciate you allowing me to mess with your data. It warms my heart how much you trust me. Great. So with that being done, let's open it up for the real Q&A. Yeah. Danny, can you change this over? Beautiful. Okay. So Arie, come a little bit closer. You're out of the camera here. Don't pretend like you like me. It's okay. So our first question from Chris. We need the ability to map EVCS with access type depending on the time of day. You provided this attribute for the doomed parking project on car parks, but never followed through with the actual timed restriction. Many EVCS on residential streets need to be restricted in the daytime, but public at night. That's very interesting. I haven't heard this one yet.
So yeah, I think it could be an interesting feature going forward. Today, we obviously provide the ability to specify the opening hours. But it could be interesting actually for the future to actually, my understanding is that basically what is asked here that surfaced or not surfaced certain, for example, charging stations that are open or not. We actually want to have one of the filters. I was talking about the filters that we want to implement. One of the filters would be open now, right? So this filter can actually help with that because the user then can select only the charging station that are open at this point of time. So it's indirectly handles this request.
All right. Next question from Xander is, the source of the imported data crowdsourced? If we find errors in the information in our PURs, can we correct it with the source? So right now, no. The best and only way that we have available for correcting at this point is through the sheet, reporting it, and then we'll send it back to the data provider. In the future, we do want to build it in the WME where you can be able to correct it, and eventually also into the app so that regular drivers will be able to report, like, for example, this station doesn't have this plug or something like that.
But just to make sure that we are covering this fully, part of the information can be corrected. So if the network name is wrong, they can fix that. Only the charging information, how many CHAdeMOs are out there, what is their speed, they cannot do that. But information such as, again, network name, payment methods,
So I want to show that on
public
WME.
or private information. All of that will actually encourage you to make the fixes too.
Donnie, can you change us back to the screen with WME? Because I just want to show that on the left panel so that everyone can see. So actually what you'll see here is that the chargers tab is locked out when it's feed connected, but this is the only information that you can't edit. You are able to edit basically everything else here, from the location and venue to the payment methods to on the more info. You have the access type, you have the phone numbers, you have the open hours. So basically, just like every other normal venue, you're going to be able to edit everything except which specific chargers are there. Okay, cool. Let's go back to our Q&As. So let's go to our next question. From Jamie, any updates on when Waze for Polestar 2 is coming? It was announced in December on a call between Google and Polestar, but silenced since. Do you have any?
I think this is more towards the in-car team, so I'm not sure about that.
Okay, so we'll take a note of this and we'll update on a future episode when we cover some in-car again. So how often will new EV charging stations get added from the partners feed? So this is a separate feed from the partners feed, by the way. It's its own EV feed with a specific provider. Right now, we're importing a static data set for you all to get on the map. And then once it's mapped out, we'll turn it on live, which will then be regularly updated. And then moving forward, as we add new feeds, I think, are we going to do the same flow where it's a static set, or are we going to put the new feeds on live to begin with?
We'll see. I think, the big import will probably, again, we need to say that in the key markets, we're importing the high portion of the charging station in any case, so we will not need to redo that again. In the new markets, I think we'll need to redo the process that we are doing today, if I understood correctly the question. But as you mentioned, Paul, the static data will be updated once the feed provider will have a new data. So again, it will allow us to actually make sure that we maintain or grow the coverage in specific countries where we have the feed support.
Excellent. Next question from Gregory. When will Waze connect the ODB port of the car to get info like how much charge is left to calculate and when to charge? So I think this is another in-car question and not really relevant for our EV feature. Right now, we're really focusing on mapping the charging stations and getting users to those charging stations. I know there's so much more we could do, but for now, we're focusing on just getting everything on the map to start. From RD, how difficult will it be to switch between EV and gas station modes for those of us who switch between EVs and ICE vehicles?
So basically, it should be pretty easy, as we have a toggle. A toggle is located in the settings stuff, so you can basically switch on and switch off. There are some limitations that we can discuss later, but basically, it should be pretty easy. If the question relates to the search experience, then basically, again, the gas category search is still there, right? It's just not prioritized on the first page, but it is part of the longer list. So again, if you are telling us that you're an EV driver, we will prioritize the EV features, but the gas features will not disappear, at least not for now.
Alrighty. Next up from David, if the charge stations are located inside a parking lot with ground levels, could be identified if the charge type changes by level. So this should actually be separate PURs if there's like multiple different charging stations within one facility. We've seen a few that were like that.
So yeah, it will depend actually on the feed, and sometimes we saw a problem that a feed provider actually aggregated all the levels into one charging station, while in fact they were different.
Right. There was one. It said that there were like 72 chargers on one. It didn't make sense.
I think it was mentioned in US. So basically, okay. So we use in our feed providers what is called OCPI protocol that defines the hierarchy of the charging station. Basically, a location, meaning that the charging station is something which is geographically collocated, and this interpretation of what is geographically collocated might be not always consistent among the geographies, right? So it might be that in certain feeds all the floors are defined as a single charging station, and sometimes they're separate. The question is, if the same people can access that, if it has the same payment methods, and if basically it belongs to the same charging network. So,
awesome. So next up from John Doe, will you add an option to always display stations on the map? I'm not sure I quite understand this one.
I think on the map itself. So while you're driving,
then you would
you'll
see
be
it.
able
I
to
see.
Right. So again, this is something that they are thinking about, and basically we're also considering that within the in-car flow, because I think we need to differentiate between the situation in which you're running low on battery, and then it might be more important for you to find charging opportunities, and then it's important to show all the charging station on the map as you drive. And the alternative to that is if you are having 100% of your battery and you are not currently looking for the chargers, then it might create a clutter on the map. So we are still defining the behavior for that. For now, you actually need to practically look for the charging station either near your current place or along your route. In the future, we are thinking about maybe actually offering the charging station around your destination. But this question as well on whether the charging station should be shown, always, is also something that we are currently considering.
I think this is an interesting one here from the chat that I haven't seen before from Mikhail. Is there or will there ever be a feature listing the max session length allowed by an EVCS? So like for a charging station that says you can only charge here for max 2 hours or something like that.
Actually, as an EV driver, and I drive a Tesla, I was not aware about this limitation. So basically, usually, at least in superchargers, let's say that once you reach 100%, from that point of time, you will be charged extra, right?
So, Mikhail, if you're aware of restrictions like that, please send it on to staff so we can take a look at those cases, because that's not something I think I'm familiar with either. So, okay, next up from Nivong. Will there be an option in the app for users to mark chargers as out of service or broken, for example? So this is getting to that real-time updates from drivers.
Right.
A lot of chargers sometimes just break, and there's no app that I know of that has all this information in one place.
So I think you started mentioning that. So if, in general, it should be covered by the feed, right? So the feed should tell us that, how many plugs types are operational right now, but sometimes this feed is not very precise. So we are building this UGC capability so the drivers will be able to specify that this particular charger is not working. So this is something.
And you're gonna get mad at me, but I'm gonna say it anyways. Like, one of like the visions for like V4 of this is to even be able to reserve a charger with Waze.
Yeah.
So that's like something that's very far out, but like the really direction that we want to go.
Why would I be mad with you?
I don't know, because it's not in the plan of what we showed in the spreadsheet or in the deck before. It's fine. Anyways, next question from Carl. In the network field, is there a quick way for our communities to customize existing providers for each country? So yes, I actually can, by request, send you or add a list into the spreadsheet of all of the current providers, and your coordinators have a form if there's any providers missing that they can request to add a missing provider if you wanted to add them yourself if they're not part of the feed. So that's a yes. And then from Ian, will you have a list of PURs that have been declined or are not linked? So that is something we're talking about now. It's probably a few weeks out. We want to give you all some time to process the PURs first, but we are going to do our own internal validation, which may turn external if we find there were a lot of rejected charging stations that shouldn't have been rejected. So basically the answer to that is yes, but not yet. And we'll get there. Hopefully we don't have to get there and everyone follows the rules, but we'll see what happens.
And just to add to that, it's important for us to have that list, but we also want to have this list to be shared with the feed provider. And that basically to tell them, look, this station, and again, as we mentioned before, the key reason for the rejection should be the non-existence of the charging station. So again, the feed provider will ask us to provide this type of information to improve their data.
Exactly. So from Gerard, we, the Netherlands, will start mapping 42,000 EVCS tomorrow, which, by the way, I just want to mention, I offered to put this in batches, but the Dutch were so adamant about getting everything right at once. So, I don't want to hear them complain that there's too much map clutter from it because I gave them the out. Some of the EVCS will be close together. Is there a possibility to check on site if the EVCS we mapped there is indeed the EVCS that is linked to the feed in that spot? Is there a unique ID for every EVCS? Will the WME or Waze show it? So we do have an internal ID. There was that number that's physically on the charging station. I think that in these sorts of cases, when you have a question, flag it on the sheet, and we can probably provide you that charging station ID to be able to validate it.
Right. Also, internally, we have some unique identifiers. Okay, I'm getting tired of identifiers.
We got 10 minutes left. Yeah. You're good. You can make it through.
Identifiers which are defined by the protocol that we are using. We keep them on the back end. I think those are the same ones that will appear on the sticker, so we'll be able to actually match those. So again, yes, so accept those, and if there is some problem with that, please report us the IDs, and we will be able to map them accordingly. And sometimes if there are several ones which are collocated, sometimes they will need to be merged. Again, this is something that we will ask our feed provider to do on their side, because those type of data processing for now will happen on their side.
Absolutely. And just like anything else, anything can be escalated. So if you have a big question like this, please send it to staff and we'll try to get you the answer you're looking for. Okay, next up from Levisu, I can't pronounce this, I'm just going to butcher it. Can our local EV company with stations join the feed to provide status availability and other info to stations about Waze? So right now, no, we're working first with just one feed provider to get this off the ground. We already have some more feed providers lined up. But if you have a feed provider local to your country that you would like to see added, absolutely send that to staff. Arie will add it to his list. And then once the time comes, he'll start reaching out.
To add a little bit to that, the way we implemented the feeds using a standard protocol, which was accepted as a standard around the world, it's called OCPI. Most of the feed providers should support that. And if the local feed, EVCS feed provider actually supports that protocol, in the future, with relative ease, we will be able to add that, specifically where we will see that it will contribute significantly to improving the coverage in specific country or region.
I just want to put this on screen really quick so that Donna has this forever saved, that Peter is confirming that the Netherlands won't complain about a cluttered map for the 42,000 charging stations. So now, Donna, you have that, so we can hold the Dutch
send the PRs
now to it. Okay, cool. Another from Ian. What is the current timeline for showing this data in app? So I'll let Arie expand on this, but we are setting an internal threshold per country for completion. So some countries it may be 50%, some it might be 70%. Anything else you'd like to say?
So nothing to add here. We are in some kind of experiment where we actually validated that the app works, doesn't crash us, etc., etc. We are actually pretty advanced in that, and everything looks good. So in 2 weeks' time, we can open the countries to 100%, and then it's only the question of the coverage. So if at least 50% in most of the countries were mapped, then we're going to open it up, and in the countries where we don't have the feed, but the legacy charging station were upgraded, we're going to open it up. So it's basically up to you. Whenever it will be ready from end of February, from 1 week from now, we will open those countries.
So another follow-up on this from Mikhail is that stations that are not part of any major vendor networks are still to be mapped manually. Absolutely. If you have stations that are not covered by the PURs, if you're in a country that's not covered by the feed, please, please, please make use of the new feature. Upgrade the stations that you currently have in WME. For any station that already is flagged as a EV charging station, you should be able to see now the new chargers tab on the left-hand panel.
Please, please, please give a priority to the PURs, because we consider them as as the criteria for launching a new country. But definitely do that, because the way the feed provider work, they primarily start partnering with the big networks. The non-network charging station or small networks will be probably will not be covered. So this could give us a unique advantage once you will map that. Yes, we'll probably not have a real-time information for those, but still we'll have an information to send our drivers to.
Absolutely. So next from Andy, how can we get early beta access? So there is no beta now. Are you talking about for the app or for WME? WME is all in production now. For the app, we're currently still in alpha testing, so we haven't even moved to beta yet. That will be opened, like you said, by the end of the month. We're going straight to.
We're running experiments in several countries
I see.
where the exposure is now 50%. But I think if somebody wants to join, they might join an alpha group for now.
Well, that's all closed.
But on the other hand, in a week time, we're gonna start opening the entire country.
So just hold tight. In a week or two, we should have the whole world opened as soon as everything is mapped. So Andy, you should see it, in a couple of weeks. So from Speedwazer, since charging plug types can't be edited, looking beyond this first static feed implementation, are we saying all EVCS place points be added by feed only? In other words, will there be no manual mapping by editors? So we've covered this a few times. The answer is no. You can absolutely manually add stations that are not covered by the feed. And in those ones that you add, you'll be able to edit every single field. Only in the feed link stations is the charging tab shut down or grayed out. But if it's not part of the feed and you want to add it, go right ahead and add it. From Anonymous. How can a European charge point operator get the OCPI connection with Waze to provide real-time data? So first of all, most of the European countries are included in the feed that we are receiving. So make sure to check out your country's spreadsheet once your coordinator shares it to see if the chargers that you are curious about are included. But for the most part, I think most of the European chargers are covered in our initial feed set.
So again, it's similar to the question on how the new aggregator can be added. So basically, in the future, we might consider working directly with big charge point operators that for some reason are not covered by the aggregator, right? So again, probably it would be easier for us to maybe see whether the desired charge point operator can be connected to the aggregator, because at the end of the day, we cannot manage that many relations with the feed providers, right? But if for some reason the charge point operator is not willing to work with any of the aggregators we're going to work in the future, and if they contribute significantly to the coverage of the specific country and they are OCPI compliant, which is the protocol that we understand, that potentially we can add them directly, bypassing the aggregators.
And just to follow up on that as well, Goober King asked, do we need to add manual EVS entries to the spreadsheet? No, the spreadsheet is only for the feed connected stations. So anything that you add to the map manually, we don't need to keep track of. It's only once it's connected to the feed, we're tracking it from the feed. The spreadsheet is basically a map for you all of all of the PURs that we are listing. I don't think we covered this in the deck before, but in a future phase of Issue Tracker, which is still only in beta, you'll have a whole filter just for EV PURs. So eventually we plan to migrate all of this over to Issue Tracker, but since we were ready before they were in production, we're doing this the old-fashioned way with the spreadsheets, but it's only for the feed-connected stations.
By the way, it might be a good idea, but let's not to actually map the new charging station or networks to capture them, to make sure that we have a list of those. But again, it's unrelated.
That's something that we can talk about later. At this point, I want us to get through the initial launch with the feed before we worry about anything else. Next question, please. We got time for one or two more. Will previously mapped Tesla chargers be automatically modified when they make them available to the rest of us? So if they mapped a Tesla charger already in the WME, so first of all, let's talk about the flow if there's a pre-existing charger like what we just did in our demo. So in our demo, we saw that there actually was a Tesla demo charger here at that Walmart in Alabama that we mapped. So we first accepted the PUR, then we merged the old station with the new station, and then we manually went through and double checked to make sure that all of the plugs were correct. So I think that answers this question, but if it doesn't, Eric, feel free to reach out to us offline and we'll get you an answer. And let's take our last question. Who is the aggregator for European EVCS real-time data? We can't tell you at this point. I'm sorry. Arie, if you want to have any final words on that.
And I agree with you, but this is one of the key aggregators that works with Google and additional players within the EV domain. They have quite a big coverage. Again, this is not a terrible secret, but we were asked not to necessarily disclose that for now.
Great. I think we have time for one more. There's like 1 minute left. Let's take it. From Peter. Okay, we've got some EVCS points verified and mapped. When will our Wazers notice the feed information? So basically, I think for the Netherlands, what percentage are they at to open up to drivers?
So basically, if we are saying that we need 50%, and they have 42,000, it means that they need 25,000.
So once you get to over 20,000 stations.
Again, we can discuss whether it makes sense, and you feel that, for such a huge country in terms of number of charging stations, we need to reduce the threshold below the 50%. Let's discuss that. For now, it will mean that we need 21,000 charging stations mapped before we open it up.
Got it. Well, Arie, I hope you didn't think that was too painful. We got through the hour.
Can you please invite me to the next one?
Absolutely.
Together
with your boss, Tina. I'm sure she'd be so happy to have you. So everyone, that's it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us on another thrilling edition of Waze Community's Office Hours. We will see you on March 5th for our next double feature special event with our new CPO, Tina Wayand. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to post them right to the WME forum on that EV post that I made a couple of weeks ago. I'll be answering your questions there. I'll even try to drag Arie onto the forum as well so we can get him answering questions as well. From everyone at Waze, I'm Brett, your host. It's been such a pleasure to be with you again and take your questions. And hopefully we will see you out there at future meetups in the next couple of months. So see you, everyone, and have a very pleasant Sunday.